All right, let's welcome in Jack. Jack, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Trying to get back as soon as possible.
What is the injury update? I think you're dealing with an oblique injury right now.
Yeah, dealing with an oblique injury. Today I'm actually getting checked out by the doc again to try to get cleared to do some more rotational things, and then from there it's just continuing to rehab and just continuing to let this thing heal. That's the hardest part. Is it's really just a time-based thing right now.
Yeah, Tommy, I want to ask you this question too, but I want to get Jack's perspective first. So, over the last, let's call it 15 years, one of the locker room conversations that we have in the NBA is if you could be any professional athlete, just the average professional athlete, not Tom Brady, not Derek Jeter, not Ronaldo or Messi, but just the average professional athlete, which professional athlete has the greatest quality of life? And I've sort of narrowed it down to either being a starting quarterback, because you can't get hit anymore. You only have to work 16 times. A PGA golfer, because you get to golf. And the third, I think, is a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, because you work every 5 or 6 days. I know you do a lot of stuff, Jack, in between starts, but I want to get your perspective. What do you think is the best job in professional sports?
If you put it that way, I don't even golf, but I'd probably put PGA golfer up there. That's got to be up there just in terms of the place you get to go, the courses you get to play on, the scenes that you get to play in front of, and even just being an average, even if you're average at best, that's everybody's dream. Everybody outside of their sport goes and plays golf just for fun. So you're pretty much doing it. You're pretty much going out and doing it for fun. I got to think that there's a lot of guys that would pick being an average PGA golfer.
Well, the other thing, when we've had a couple golfers on recently that they mentioned, is you get to make your own schedule. So if you're just not feeling it for a month and you want to go to Tahiti or whatever, like, that's fine. You can just come back.
See, I didn't know that. I mean, that even adds up to it. If you get to make your schedule like that, come on now.
As long as you've qualified for certain events, like Matthew Wolff, he missed some time. He wanted to take a break for his mental health, and he took like a month off, and then he comes back and he's in contention at the U.S. Open this weekend. Brooks Koepka doesn't even play golf. Like, he doesn't practice. He just shows up to the tournament and plays for 4 days.
And there you go.
Then goes and chills.
There you go. He just enjoys his time off. He enjoys his time off, goes out, competes well enough, and then just hangs out. That's what it should be. I mean, the life of a starting pitcher, depending on the way you do it. Some guys sit around for 4 days and do nothing. Some guys sit around 4 days and are constantly doing something to get ready for that 5th day. There's a lot of players that say that, you guys have it easy. It's so nice. You pitch it once every 5 days. But I would say that doing the PGA golf life would be there. I think there's a lot more that goes into it.
What is the lifestyle of a major league pitcher? So you guys, let's say you've got an afternoon game. You're in Chicago for 4 days. You've got an afternoon Thursday game. You pitch, and you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Chicago. What are your obligations at that point?
Well, I would say this is, if let's just say, so it's Thursday afternoon game. After that game, for me, I probably have like an hour of rehab and treatment that I'll go through after the game. Last one leaving the field, last one on the bus. And then the next day, I'm usually the first one there. Go through treatment, get a workout in, condition, and go through more treatment, recovery, sometimes cold tub, and then do that the next day. And then you start prepping for whatever that next start is. So now we're in the process of those next 3 days in Chicago, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I've worked out twice, conditioned all 3 days. Not really. I mean, if you get some day games, you go out to dinner, hang out, and do that. But other than that, with my routine and the way that I go, I'm usually the first one getting there and going through everything possible to get done prior to the game. Because when game time comes, I'm pretty much out there for the game the entire time and watching it. Some guys go in and out, and you won't see them for a while.
Are there pitchers that spend those off days golfing and smoking weed? Because that's a common thing that I've heard. That's
a
common
lot of guys.
Thing that I've heard.
So a lot of guys will go golf, and one of our guys, Adam Wainwright, he's been trying to get me to golf for years. He's disappointed I haven't picked it up yet. But guys will go out and golf, and then depending on the way the schedule works, they'll be up at 7 a.m. going to golf and be done, and then still be going being the first ones at the field. But everybody's routine is different. Some guys like to do less and just hang out and enjoy the couple days. I can't just sit around and do nothing.
Do you have any like superstitious stuff on a start date that you do?
See, I don't call anything superstitious because for me it's all part of routine. I would say it becomes superstitious if I then have a bad outing and decide to blame it on that. Like if I have a bad outing and then I'm like, I put my left sock on before my right sock today. And that's when it becomes superstitious. But I'm like, I'll never blame an outing on that. I have my routine. I do things in order, like down to a T with a time. Maybe the most superstitious thing is usually if, prior up until last year when they wouldn't let us make PB&Js in the clubhouse, but I had one right before every game.
You sound a lot like me. It's always fun to talk to someone who's obsessed with their routine and is such a creature of habit. Because I have like everything on a game day down to.
Do you have it laid out? You have it laid out down to a minute.
Down to the minute of everything, and we got the countdown clock, and even like when you eat your pregame meal, when your pregame meal gets delivered on the road, all that stuff. The weirdest thing that I do is when there's an order to putting on my jersey and when I put my jersey on. Mm-hmm. But when I put my warm-up pants on to go out for warm-ups, I have a very specific way that I button them and which buttons get left unbuttoned. It's the weirdest. I can't have all the buttons buttoned. It drives me crazy.
So if you button up the wrong one, are you then like, all right, I got to take it off and I got to do this again?
Yeah, I take the whole thing off. I start with just the top buttons. I put my legs back in.
See, I don't do that. Like I put there's a order to the way that like I pull my pants up to stretch them out a little bit, and then I'll put my cleats on, and then I'll put my left cleat on. Shoot, I gotta think about this. I'll put my right cleat on, my left cleat on. I'll tie my left cleat. I'll tie my right cleat, and then I'll pull my right leg down, my left leg down. But I've screwed that order up so many times that I'm like, it's part of the routine. I can think about it. But I've screwed it up and gone out, had a good start. I'll be like, all right, whatever. I'm not going to be like, all right, I got to take my cleats off because I put this. That's why I'm like, all right, I can't let it happen.
It's funny that we're talking about this though, because in some way it gives us control and it gives us order in a chaotic environment or whatever. But all the stuff you talked about prior to this, the rest, the recovery, the stretching, the ice, whatever it may be, like that's ultimately what's going to help your performance. Whether or not you tuck your shirt in at 30 minutes on the countdown clock or 25 has nothing to do with anything.
Absolutely, it has nothing to do with it. And that's why I say like that's where it goes from routine to superstition. If you look back and you're like, man, I didn't wear my my lucky boxers today. I wore the wrong socks to the field or something. Like everybody's got something like that, and that's where it goes back. Now, I definitely, if I have a bad start, like those cleats go in the trash. They never get worn again. Like they either go in the trash or I will never wear them again. So that's the one thing that for sure.
Tommy, I don't know if you saw this. PJ Tucker the other day, I can't remember what game it was. It was the game that Brooklyn blew them out. He wore 3 different pairs of sneakers. So that's like a common thing. It's like you'll swap sneakers out at halftime if you're having. I've never heard a guy going 3 different pairs in one game though.
He's got a lot of shoes.
He's got a lot of shoes.
Yeah,
Nike's paying him a lot of money to just wear every colorway.
He's got plenty. He's got plenty enough to go through. He could go through 5 or 6 in a game.
I know it's wild. And speaking of clothes and fashion, so we were told that you're into fashion, and I got to ask you about MLB fashion because the NBA is sort of like probably the preeminent league for the runway walk,
Right.
coming to a game, getting off the bus, all that stuff. Like it's a highlight, something people look forward to. There are Instagram accounts dedicated to guys' fits. I remember I was in Houston. Cubs, I think, were in town, and they were staying at the same Four Seasons as us. And getting in and out of the elevator, it was all guys wearing like Ed Hardy shirts.
I mean, I'm sure.
And I was no. The only guy I ever saw wearing an Ed Hardy shirt in the NBA was Dwight Howard. That was the only guy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Where does the MLB fashion, like where does that world exist? Is it small? Is it coming up?
I don't even know if it's up and coming. It is very tiny. It is a select few. It's very tiny. You see teams. There's certain teams now that'll do the whole. They got the Braves, the Astros. Like they have their tunnels and their fit pictures that go on. But when you see them, you're like, all right. I mean, it's not the NBA. It's not the NFL, which I don't expect it to be. But then you get some of them. It's like you kind of just rolled out of bed and showed up today and like, a day game after a night game, you pull up in some sandals and some sweats and like a t-shirt that don't fit, like nothing fits. And it's just like, all right, it's a small world. A lot of guys just don't care, which is fine. They just, they pull up. Even when it comes to, we have, some teams have rules for when we travel. I think that you guys are different. I'm not sure. But, for us, we got to wear a suit jacket. And that's like our one thing. Like we have to wear a suit jacket everywhere we go.
Like on the bus? Oh, on the plane. On the plane.
When we travel, we got to wear a suit jacket. And you see it, like they don't fit properly. Sometimes they don't match. They just said, you know what, I'm gonna just throw this on because I have to wear a suit jacket, and it's not really, nothing's really laid out or coordinated. So it's a small world, and you see it throughout the league. It's different. There's a couple guys that like to dress well, look nice. I think it's very simple to have a suit that looks good and looks nice on you. You ain't even got to do anything extravagant.
Who's the worst dressed guy on your team? There's always one guy I feel like that everybody knows is the worst dressed guy.
Well, we have one. He's been hurt all year, but in years past, I would say one of our guys, Dakota Hudson. He's recovering from TJ. He's on the list.
That's enough. That's enough. I just need you to throw one team in under
we
the
need,
bus. That's
we
all
need one name. We just need one name.
You could put 4 or 5 of them into the same category of like y'all like just look the same. But yeah, Dakota's on there. I love him, but yeah.
Jack, how aware are you? So we have talked about this with a few guys in different sports over the last couple of months, but how aware are you in terms of like the individual branding of players in the league versus like a sport like the NBA where, you don't have to be on the Lakers or the Celtics or whatever to be a brand. You can be in any city and you can sort of figure out a way to get there. But in baseball, it feels like it's a little more challenging. How aware are you of that dynamic? And is that something that you like particularly care about, or you just?
Yeah. So it's something that MLB has struggled with massively. They've struggled so much in trying to promote their players and have, for several years now, Mike Trout has been the best player in baseball playing for the Angels. And that's been the one thing is trying to promote him. And, he doesn't want that. He's like, he didn't want that face title, or he didn't want to, try to be the LeBron of baseball in terms of like the most recognizable figure, even though everybody knew it. And you had kids all over who were fans of him, but it was never the same. But it's something that MLB has struggled with in terms of how they promote their players, how much they actually pay attention to certain things. And it's tough seeing that. It's tough seeing the way that the NBA that they have that you can go and be this guy no matter where you are and no matter what city you're in. In baseball, more of it, you kind of have to land into the right city and the right environment. Much the way that Tatis has blown up, which by all means, he's unbelievable player. Ended in a very good environment in San Diego, and the way that MLB has promoted them. Then you get some guys who they'll kind of just fly under the radar completely and could be unbelievable, and it's a lot harder for them to try to build the same type of brand and do the same kind of thing.
I think a casual sports fan could recognize or name a bunch of NFL quarterbacks, the skill position guys, right?
Right.
In baseball, it's a few guys. The casual sports fan can name a bunch of NBA players. For whatever reason, our league is different. And you brought up Mike, and I've asked Mike several times to come on the podcast. He's always denied. He always said no, which is fine. The last request was a few months ago, and he said, he basically was like, listen, I'm a fan of we had to through a third party, but he's like, I'm a fan of JJ. He's been a fan of his since Duke, but I just don't want to do it, And I to some of it, I respect. First of all, I respect that. Some of it, I think, in the NBA is we love it. Like, we love the attention. It's I think it's ingrained in you from the time you were in high school or middle school. Like, when you're the star player, there's benefits that come with that. I also think in the league, though, I think our star players understand there's a responsibility to the league. And if they're marketed and they're promoted and they perform at a certain level, then everybody gets to eat because of that. And that's where I think there's been a great partnership between the NBA and the star players. I remember the playoffs when I was with the Mavs. We were in the training room or something, watching the first game of the night. And our game was coming up at 8:30 local time or whatever it was. And on the byline underneath on ESPN, it said Luka versus Kawhi.
Yeah.
8:30 or whatever time it was.
Right. Yeah.
And we all laughed because it's like, well, it's the Mavs versus the Clippers.
Right.
But that's the way our league is.
That's marketed. The way the league is run. That's the way they promote things. And there's some good to it. There's some bad. I'm sure sometimes you're in there, you're like, all right, they're going to make this about, strictly about Luka and Kawhi and try to run that story. And there's some parts of it that's like, all right, here we go. And there's, it's the same thing in baseball. Somebody could do it's, the two different players could have the same stat lines in a day. But when that the one guy's going to get a little more love and a little more publicity than the other guy who kind of might fly under the radar. But it is what it is. It goes that way in all sports. But I think that the NBA, I think that the way you said it, that those guys take it as a responsibility to work in the promotion of the league is good. And I think it's getting around there with baseball. We've got so many young guys coming up that are, I think, with it and are about doing it in the way that they do it. And some of it comes natural. Tatis that's just the way that he is. That's the way he plays the game. It's the way he's always played. And it's fun to watch. Yeah.
He's super fun to watch.
I was going to ask that about some of the younger guys in general, whether it feels like it's changing. I know a guy in LA I've spent a little bit of time with is Mookie Betts, and he's another one he sort of takes that responsibility on in terms of being like, I don't just want to play. I want to sort of transcend the sport. Is that something you guys talk about at all, or it just kind of is more of like an individual thing?
I think a lot of where it comes from, and I've talked to Mookie and a couple other guys. I think a lot of where it comes from is trying to grow the game, because it feels like baseball it's just fallen off in terms of not just in terms of popularity, but in terms of kids going and playing it. It's become a lot more difficult. And so some of the guys have looked at it and been like, okay, look, if we can take on this challenge of trying to promote the game and do this, at some point we're going to get more kids to start doing it and more kids to want to be Mookie Betts, to be Fernando Tatis, to be Ronald Acuna, and at a certain point you're going to get that, because that was something that was so prevalent when I was coming up with Jeter, with Griffey, with all those guys. And it was just like, the star power was at an all-time high at that point.
When I was watching baseball on a daily basis growing up, and even pretty much through early in my NBA career until I just became obsessed with the NBA, and it's all I really cared about in sports. I did feel like there was, maybe I was biased because I was in it every day, but I was watching every day. But I did feel like in the 90s, there was a lot of star power. Like Manny Ramirez, Pedro Martinez, those guys. I became a Red Sox fan because Pedro was my favorite pitcher and Manny was my favorite player. Yep. And within 2 years, they both went to the Red Sox, so I had no choice. I had to become a Red Sox fan, and I still kind of am to this day. I want to ask the why follow up. So besides star power potentially lacking in some ways, why do you think the popularity of the sport has dropped off? Specifically, let's talk a little bit about like youth sports. And I'm wondering if some of it is just the specialization of youth sports now and how there's no real season. So it's almost like a lot of kids are now picking sports at 8 or 9 years old and then playing that sport only, where some of that development that comes when you're 12, 13, 14, if you keep playing baseball, you stay in the game.
So there's a couple of things to it. One is sometimes MLB, they just don't try. It's not like they're not working together with the players of like, what can we do to make the game more marketable, and watching, how the NBA does it in terms of, and they've done certain things to show guys, off the field personalities and whatnot. Even the way that they mic players up during the game and try to have conversation mid-game. Some people like it. I'm like, you got a guy out there trying to play center field and you're trying to have a conversation with him like during it. I'm like, I don't know how you guys get mic'd up, but you always get that,
we're in closer proximity to each other though.
Right. But
that's
you get coming out of a timeout and they'll play, here's, they'll still play a little clip of, somebody giving direction or just whatever it is, or somebody coming off the bench, being all excited. And the way that they do it is just better. And then the other part of it is the blackouts. It's so hard to watch a baseball game because everything's run through MLB. Everything's run through like MLB, the app. You got to buy their league pass and everything. But then if you're in that city, it's blacked out, and you have to try to watch the game on the normal television channel. So for somebody in LA, right, you try and watch the Dodgers. You have the MLB, like you have their whole league pass and everything. And, if you are in another city, you can watch Dodgers, no problem. You try to pull it up on that in LA, and it's blacked out. You can't watch it. And you have to go onto your cable provider to go to the actual Dodgers channel to watch it. It just stuff like that makes no sense.
You're like, have you talked to a person under the age of 25 recently, whether they have a television?
Right. No, nobody, like I haven't had cable in 4 or 5 years because it just run everything to find different ways to do it.
Do you have peers? So much of like NBA culture is people talking about this guy versus that guy, Kobe versus LeBron. Is there peers that you measure yourself against?
I'd say yes and no. In terms of, I'm not going to go out and I can't go out and compare myself to other guys, especially throughout the year. It'll get so hard and so frustrating, and especially because of, I've been through struggling in the beginning and then going and have like finishing off the year really well, that if I'm going to compare stat to stat throughout the year, it goes up and down. You're going to have some good ones, you're going to have some bad ones, but by the end of the year, then you can look at it. I mean, I'll say this because my two of my best friends in the league are both pitchers. At the end of the year, I definitely want to look at, how we all did. And I want to be better than them. They want to be better than I was. And then just as a staff, I will say that definitely as a staff, me and Adam Wainwright, we go back and forth, and we say at the beginning of the year, he tells me, don't let me get a lead in any stat category because I will not give it up. And I just think that's all right, cool. Like, I'm not going to let it happen. And this year it didn't happen. And obviously, he's got time to catch up.
Don't kill me for saying this, but I've said before that baseball in a lot of ways is an individual sport masquerading as a team sport. I could never imagine James Harden going to Kyrie like, dude, I'm going to lead the team in points and assists and rebounds. Like, some of it is, like Luka on our team is going to take the most shots. Okay, right. Whatever. But like, you would never say that to your teammates.
So that's fair. That's in that way, yes. And I think you can only do it as you can do it as a starting pitcher because you guys you pitch on at separate nights. I think you could do it as a reliever too. Like it could be a challenge between two different guys of like, if I get the call here, I'm gonna go out and punch the side. I'll end up with more strikeouts than you this year. Yeah, you couldn't really do that as like, two star players on a team trying to be like, I'm gonna average more points. It's kind of just whatever works for the team.
I think there's more cooperation required. In basketball than in baseball.
One ball to go around. You guys kind of got to get along a little bit.
Yeah.
Jack, what do you think makes DeGrom who he is?
So when he was going, he was unbelievable to start the year, has still been unbelievable, but they were coming to New York, or they were coming to us, and we were saying we were going to corner him. Like I was going to sit him down in a chair, be like, tell me everything. What are you doing? How do you do it? And I've talked to Stroman about it. And I did talk to DeGrom, but what makes him so good is he knows himself. Like he's so very aware of himself and who he is and what he has to do. And he makes it so simple. It's not overly complicated. It's not, I look at these numbers or this before going into a start. He just knows what he has to do. And he knows that if he executes his stuff, he's going to be golden. They can't touch him. And that's what he's continued to do over and over. That was the basic message I got from him, and the message that I got from he just knows his body. And everybody's, does he work out all the time? No, he's one of those that kind of enjoys his days in between. And he's he's also naturally gifted and has thrown harder and harder and harder every year, which it's supposed to go the other way. Like you're not supposed to keep gaining velocity. But he's naturally gifted and he knows himself and who he is.
How much prep is involved as a starting pitcher in terms of knowing the other team's, tendencies, the other guy's tendencies, where they like the ball, what they struggle with? Like, how much time do you spend on all that before a start?
So again, everybody's different. Me, I spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of time. I'll go sit in front of that computer. Probably I'll sit in front of that computer and go through their numbers twice over that 5-day span. And then the day of, I give myself 30 minutes because I can overdo it and know too much and then get out there and be like, okay, I know too much. I can't do. So I have to ease up. But there's ways to do it. Like how DeGrom says he knows his stuff. He knows what he has to do. And if he does that, then he goes out and he executes. So there's parts of that. And then there's parts of knowing everything about the other team and their hitters and tendencies and what they like and don't like.
We talk a lot on the show about the issues in college basketball right now. And I think a lot of the issues are the one and done culture. And so my draft class in 2006 was the very first draft that you couldn't come out of high school directly to the NBA. You had to go. So I sort of missed the entire one and done era. And I believe that players, should be able to go out of high school to the NBA. There's probably a lot of owners that don't want that because it's hard as an 18-year-old to adjust. But the infrastructure's I think in place in your sport to allow guys to do that. Whereas I think in our sport, we don't have that infrastructure yet of, a complete minor league system. We're getting there, but we're just not there yet. What was your decision to come out of high school directly to MLB? Or, you got drafted by the Cardinals in the first round, but why did you do that instead of going to UNC? And thank God you didn't go to UNC, man.
I was waiting for that one to come out eventually. That's just a funny thing as it is, the whole UNC Duke thing. Because I'll say this: my best friend was a Duke fan. Everybody, I'm gonna be honest, man. Everybody was a fan of yours at Duke. It was unbelievable to watch. That's freaking awesome. But my best friend, he was a Duke fan growing up. Still is a diehard Duke fan, and I grew up like, because of you being at Duke and him being a Duke fan. I was like, all right, like I grew up liking Duke. And I can remember, even to when Kyrie was there, like I had a Duke. My mom gave me a Duke hoodie when I was like, I grew up Duke basketball fan. It was USC ride or die and everything else. But when it came to basketball, it was because of JJ Redick, like Duke basketball. And through when Kyrie was there, my mom got me a Duke sweatshirt and I was like a freshman in high school. And then when I committed as a junior to North Carolina, I was like, all right, well, we got to throw everything got to be thrown away. I was like, I can't have there's no affiliation Duke anymore. So that's just a little thing on that. But
before hold on, before you answer
yeah.
the actual question, I just want the listener and the viewer on YouTube to know, I did not know any of this. This was not this was not a plan by me.
Yeah.
This is awfully flattering. So thank you. I'm super flattered, Tommy. This is great. I mean, it's an ongoing thing on our show. The guests come on, they shit on Tommy.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I actually would prefer it if you didn't like. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this portion of the segment. Just keep going, Jack.
But look, like it really just came down to money, and my mom, I was going to college all the way up. I was going to go to Carolina all the way up until draft day. I was going to Carolina. And we made the decision real simple was when we were like, well, how much is a college education worth? Because obviously baseball, you got to go for 3 years. So how much is that worth? We came up with, well, what do we think you can get? And, my agent was like, well, we think anywhere from, 1.5, 1.5 million signing bonus to like, 2.5 at the most. And so we came up, we ended up with 2. We were like, look, $2 million, that's what, $2 million after tax is going to come out to 1.2, 1.4. That's what my mom thought about it. She was like, you're not getting 2. Like all these, and this is for everybody who's like, who gets the $800,000 signing bonus. Well, you're not getting 800,000. Like it's great. That's a great number. Like if you're actually getting that, by all means, like take it, but you're not going to get that. So she came up with 2, and we set that was a hard set number. It could have been $10,000 less than $2 million, and I would have gone to school because I was fine with it. I was okay with it. Came down to draft day, called my name, talked to my agent later that night. He said they're going to give it to you, and it was set from there. It took the decision out of my hands. It was just like if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I'm gonna go to school.
Your personal story is pretty incredible. So basically, from my understanding, I'll let you tell the story because you can tell it way better than I can. But from our understanding, it's you were adopted by your mother at 3 weeks, and she basically raised you.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the way it was. Yeah, my mom adopted me when I was super young. Just her, single mom. She had my brother. And she raised the both of us. So, she was the mom running around. I always found a way to get me, and the hardest part about it for her was the fact that we did nothing in the same area. Like we grew up in LA area, but you know how big LA is. It's you're all over. We lived in Burbank. She worked at Universal Studios. 15, 20 minutes away. We went to school in Glendale, which is 15, 20 minutes the other direction. And then I played baseball in Sherman Oaks, which is like 30 minutes from where we actually lived. And so somehow she always managed to, get us to school, go to work, and then go from work to pick me up, take me to baseball. And then if we had basketball, we did that back in Burbank, like late at night. And then she had my brother and I, and was doing that with both of us, and managed to do all that work, make dinner every night, make breakfast every morning. Just so many sacrifices from her, and I'll always be thankful for that.
Amazing mom, man, just incredible.
Absolutely.
What you didn't spend a ton of time in the minor leagues, but what are the minor leagues like? How would you describe them?
Tough, man, and some of the meals that you eat, the food that you get provided, sleeping on buses for, we had a couple 16-hour bus rides, 14-hour bus rides, 8-hour bus rides through the night. We had a night where, flight commercial in AAA where played in Seattle. Our flight got canceled, and we had a game in Memphis the next day. So that flight got canceled that night out of Seattle, and we're sleeping in the airport. We got guys. Everybody usually flies together. Now we got guys on all different types of flights getting in. I think I got in at 5 o'clock the next day. I pitched the day before, thankfully. So they were like, "You're going to be the last one in. We don't really care. You're going to Atlanta. You're going to sit in Atlanta for like 2 hours, and then you're going to find your way to Memphis." But it's a lot of bus rides. Nothing glamorous. A lot of small towns. It's tough. Hard, and that's probably the part that makes no sense to everybody is, you sign these kids, you sign these guys, and all different ages, and you put them through the minor league system, and you talk about nutrition, you talk about sleep, you talk about, these are all the things you need to do to be a successful major league player. But then the food you provide is shit. Like, you are getting the most unnutritious things that don't work. And some organizations are better. We were not very good at this. We did not provide the best food, all of those things. And you're just like, well, how am I supposed to stay in shape? And by the way, I'm making $1,500 a month. So, luckily for me, I could live off of some of my signing bonus. But for other guys, I mean, it's like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every night because it's all you could afford for dinner. It's what you could afford for lunch. And you're just eating that to stay full and not run into McDonald's every day. But I guess now, Chad Ochocinco is like, no, you could absolutely live off McDonald's. So who knows with that? That's just that's funny to me. But it's there's two ways obviously looking at it, but yeah.
No, I think that's an interesting point. And having had some guests on that have played in the G League, they've echoed some of those same sentiments.
Is it that bad too?
Yeah, I mean, they're taking bus rides. They're in small towns. They're not staying at glamorous hotels or eating at glamorous meals. And so a lot of those details are the same.
And I get the bus rides and everything. It was the nutrition aspect of you have nutrition meetings every spring, and then you see the food you're being served. I'm getting fake watered down eggs and 2 pieces of bacon and some potatoes, and that's my breakfast that I get.
Yeah. I think one of the I know I mentioned Tom Hagen earlier, who is an agent for CAA, and I grew up with him, and we talk about the delayed gratification and the grind to get to your first contract that exists in Major League Baseball, and having to basically go through arbitration 3 or 4 times, which you recently went through. I mean, in the NBA, if you're a first round pick, you're instantly a millionaire, not a signing bonus, but you're guaranteed basically 4 years, and depending on where you're drafted, anywhere from 40 million to 10 million.
Right.
And then you can sign a rookie extension after your 3rd year, which the best players do.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're worth 150 million, and you're 22 years old.
You're Jason Tatum. You're 20.
And I guess, can you just talk about that aspect of baseball a little bit, but also as it relates to you? Did that influence at all you coming out of college? Because, it's the same thing in basketball. The sooner you get to the NBA, the sooner you get to your second contract. And every time you sort of delay that, every year you delay that, well, then all of a sudden you're 30. You're 31 on your 3rd deal. You're 34, and then you could potentially be giving up millions of dollars in future earnings.
Yeah, it definitely didn't influence my decision to come out of high school. I think that solely came down to the money, because if you ask my mom, and she jokes about it today, she was like, I feel like if you went to college after 3 years, you would have gone top 5, no doubt. And that's one of her confidences about me. She's like, I had no problem with you going to college. You would have gone top 5, and you probably would have found your way to the big leagues still at 21. I would have been drafted at 21. She's like, that summer you probably would have gone to high or AA, but I think by September you would have found your way called up. And she believes that. And so I don't think it influenced me, but I'll say that it's a long process of 3 years of making, league minimum, which sounds, it's not, you're making really good money. Like for what you do, it's, $560,000 a year by all means. Like that's great. But then you got to go through 3 years of arbitration, and then you're a free agent. And what's messed up about the process, and hopefully it gets changed, and I think I'm okay to say this, but is that whole thing is roughly 6 years. It's 6 years of team control. But right now the average career in Major League Baseball is 6 years. So you're getting guys who go through 6 years, and you think if you went through 6 years of playing, pro ball or playing in the major leagues, that you'd maybe be set up for life. But you go through 6 years, you're just getting the free agency. You're just being able to sign a contract. And in arbitration, you can only make so much money. Hats off to the Padres for paying Tatis when they did, because they could have paid. He would have made completely under what his value is for the next 4 years. Like he would only have been able to make so much money. But they signed him, and they did the right thing, but they didn't have to do that. They could have held on to that for a while. And what's worse is that 6 years could actually be like 8 if you keep going up and down. And so you could be up and down, and and so that's where it gets even worse. But I won't say it's frustrating. I'm happy for all the guys in the NBA that get what's theirs, and every single one of them deserve it. I just think there's better ways for baseball to try to figure it out.
Do you think players pay attention to that, the Padres thing? Because we talk about this with the NBA all the time, about players just paying attention to how these teams operate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it. You get two guys in Ronald Acuna Jr. and Fernando Tatis, who both signed early. Both are, right here is who's better. It's like this. And, one signed 8 for 100, like 2 years, and another one 13 for like 300 plus. And Acuna's worth just as much as Tatis is. And then you've got Juan Soto. I don't know if you know the kid with the Nationals, who's unbelievable, right there with them. And I think he's making 8. He's going through the slow process of going through arbitration. So you get 3 different ways, but guys see it, and you notice things. At least I do.
There's a lot of cities on the MLB docket that I've never traveled to, or that I don't spend a lot of time in. What are do you have any underrated stops on the MLB schedule? Like, there's the obvious ones, of course. I mentioned Chicago, like New York, LA, Miami, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure guys in the big leagues like those stops. Is there any underrated stops in baseball?
I enjoy going to DC. Obviously the main ones, like, the main big cities that you go to, they're always great. I enjoy going to DC. And I would say that for me, Pittsburgh is underrated. The stadium is beautiful. It's really nice. I love playing there. And then the area where we stay is nice. There's plenty of stuff to do. You can go walk around. I know that guys find good golf there as well. So I would say that Pittsburgh's on that list off the top of my head of probably cities guys look at it and are like, oh, we got to go to Pittsburgh. And I'm like, I don't mind going to Pittsburgh and hanging out for a few days.
How's Cincinnati? I'm very curious about Cincinnati.
That's not on the underrated list. That's it's not on the underrated list. Yeah, that's
okay. Say no more.
Yeah.
Say no more.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on this, on the foreign substance thing? It seems like it's a hot button thing, but we just haven't talked about it all on the show. It's like, are we missing something? Like, what is your sort of like overall?
So, yeah, say the right things here. It's okay. It's something that has been around. There's a rule on the books in baseball, and they've had this rule forever. and it was rarely ever enforced. I think 4 guys have been ejected from a game for it since 2000, but every pitcher pretty much ever has used something, whether it's, sunscreen, hair gel, Vaseline, something like everything going back, like they used to use all that stuff, where it now has gotten, and it was for grip, because the balls they give us, they try to change the basketball a few years ago.
They did it my rookie year. It lasted half a season. Next year, we're using Wilson balls. I was one of the testers for the balls, and I will say this publicly: the balls suck, and I think our guys are going to be really unhappy when those balls come out next year. Like really unhappy.
So imagine this now, that every year MLB, like NBA, like just made subtle changes to the basketball, and they never said anything. They'll never say anything publicly, that they make subtle changes to it, to whatever, to make it bounce a little bit quicker off, or make it softer when it hits the rim, try to get better touch or everything. So that's what MLB does every year, is they change the ball ever so slightly. And then they rub it up before the game with this mud. But mud, when that happens, it then dries into like dust. And so now you're throwing a dusty, like it's a cue ball. Is that's the way that we all described it, as you're throwing a cue ball. You don't really feel the seams, you don't feel the ball. So guys have used stuff from sunscreen rosin to pine tar to a bunch of different things throughout the years, and to try to get a better grip. And the most well-known one is sunscreen and rosin, which, the rosin bag right behind the mound. And when you put them together, it becomes a little bit sticky. Now, where it got out of hand is when now guys started to use stuff to get better. It was said it was for grip, but when guys figured out they could manipulate the baseball more and make it move more and make what we call their spin rates, all their pitches better, that's where stuff got out of hand. And that is where, when the spider tack stuff got introduced and guys, stuff went way out of hand, that's where it got out of hand. And the fact that we went to 0 is problematic. It's not good, especially when they change the ball every year and guys have to figure out, okay, well, how is this ball spins differently. This ball moves differently. The ball this year moves laterally more than it ever has. Like, it goes side to side more than ever. And supposedly doesn't fly as far. But the foreign substance thing, they had to come out and say, we need to enforce this rule, which doesn't make sense. If there's a rule on the book and something was going on, it should have been enforced forever. And then it's what defines the foreign substance. Sunscreen is legal, rosin is legal. It just so when you put them together, they become sticky. And so what is a foreign illegal substance?
Like a good hair paste. I can't imagine the NBA ever trying to do this with us. We would have a revolt. Like, because the thing, no, I'm serious. The thing is, so guys will use like chalk, or guys will use like there's a sticky rub that you it's meant for your shoes, but they'll put it on their hand. Working hands. Every locker room now has like 25 tubs of working hands, which is the greatest lotion ever. It's just every basketball is different. So like we can't play with brand new basketballs.
Right.
There's no grip on them. They clang off the rim. So you've got to use newer, like older basketballs, and they start to change color. You can grip them better. Yeah. But night to night, you don't know how cold the arena is going to be. You don't know what environment. Have I been in 24 hours prior to the arena? Have I been flying? Am I in Minnesota in February? Are my hands dry? So you've got to like use all these like working hands, chalk, whatever. We have to play with them. Every guy uses something grip on their hands. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And if I don't, but we're obviously not. It doesn't really affect whether the shot goes in or not, I think. We're not pitching to someone, so I get that part of it. Yeah. But, oh no, we'd lose our minds.
100%. It's where we are. And is there a rule on the book like against that? Like,
no, you can do whatever you want on your hands. Yeah. You have to. We have to.
Yeah. So there was a rule. I mean, there's a rule on the book, and they just now are enforcing it because things got out of hand. And, it became when all these analytics came around and the numbers, and you realized like, oh, if your fastball, normally is this, but I can make it, this much better, and guys aren't going to hit it, then I'm going to do that. And that's where it got out of hand. And MLB was like, okay, now we're going to step in. But of course they went and said, you know what, can't use anything. You can use rosin and even rosin and sweat. Like, okay, if I start wiping my forehead and everything, am I now? And so today's day one of them enforcing it, Monday. It's going to be very interesting to see if somebody like wipes their forehead and then grabs a rosin bag. There's a lot of gray areas to what's going to happen right now.
Right. It also gives everyone one more thing to watch and one more thing to worry about. It sucks. I think it sucks. You guys should be able to spit on the ball, do whatever you want. Well, I don't care.
I didn't know that everybody was using different things. And then
I use a combination. So I do working hands right before the game. Before every time I shoot, I use working hands. Like even in the off season, working hands. Then I do it working hands right before I go out for warm-ups. And then every time I check into the game, this is gonna be gross, but I take a little bit of chalk, I rub it in my hands, I spit in my hands, and then I rub that together. And that's the alchemy for the perfect formula of how I want my hands to feel on the basketball.
See, so for me, I'm like, well, maybe that is something that somebody could try in baseball, but like, is that now illegal or is that illegal? I wonder I'm going to go in and see what that feels like.
Do working hands, bro. Working hands.
Because we have that. Yeah. Everybody's got that.
All right. Last question. And just grew up in LA. Who is the greatest LA Laker of all time?
It's Kobe. That's why. I mean, what are we? What
are we doing?
Really?
What do you mean?
Magic's not. You're not.
I'm with you, Jack.
I can't. I mean, I'm gonna run with Kobe. You're asking a guy who grew up in LA from '95, like born in '95, watched him create the Staples Center and build the Staples Center, win 5 rings, go to 2 more. Just everything he did, like as a Laker and what he did for the Lakers. I don't. There's not even like a way to try to argue it. I understand the going with Magic. I still want to hear a reasoning for it, but
okay. The only reason it's to me, it's like those two guys are 1A and 1B, right?
Right.
And I get what you're saying about the Staples Center, but Magic literally built the modern NBA, and he won just as many rings. He doesn't have the scoring volume that Kobe had, of course, but in all other ways, he's on par with Kobe statistically. Didn't have the longevity, of course. Right. But for that window of his prime, he won 5 championships, which is as many as Kobe won. And I just think I look back and I'm like, we have to give a ton of credit to the guys in the 80s. They were the generation of players that built what is today's NBA.
100%. They absolutely did. I mean, obviously, I think my answer is going to be biased. Like that's just that's what I grew up on. So, but that's the only other one that I'll listen to for like, okay, I can understand somebody saying Magic. Any other one, I don't think I'll really listen to at all.
Fair enough.
You're going to try to get me off, but I was told I was going to hear about your baseball career. And
oh my God.
AJ, so we'll close on this. AJ claimed,
oh my God. I was trying to get off this.
He claims that he was going to be, AJ claims that he would have been an MLB player if he had stuck with it. He has no evidence to support this.
No evidence whatsoever.
No evidence. I didn't say, hold on. I didn't say I would definitely be a Major League Baseball player. I said I would have played professional baseball at some level. Like I would have got drafted. Now I might have got drafted in the 36th round, but I would have got drafted. So the guys that I grew up playing with that got drafted, as a pitcher, I was as good or better than them. And that's my thing. I'll give you 2 stories out of my baseball career. So I had 1 loss in my career. All right. Little League.
Okay.
It was Little League. All right. There's 6 innings, so there's 18 outs.
Right.
So in my one loss, I struck out 17 batters. And the only other out recorded was a grounder back to me, which I ran to first base myself and tagged first base. I did not trust my teammates. We had like 9 errors that game. I think it was like a 2-hitter with 9 errors.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call out the shortstop's name, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing, my last Little League game, I played in the National AAU tournament in Salt Lake City, flew back to Virginia, and I was wiped from, 14 days in Salt Lake. I forgot that my Little League All-Star team was in the state tournament. So I landed in Roanoke Sunday at 2:00. My dad's like, you got to be in Portsmouth, which is 4.5 hours away. You got to be in Portsmouth to pitch tomorrow. So we had a family friend drive me through the night, basically. I pitched the next day. It went into extra innings, 8 innings. I struck out 13 and got the win. All right. I was a stud pitcher. All right. Stud.
Do you think you could still do it? What do you think you could hit off the mound? This is always an interesting question.
I think we should test this out.
I think we should test this out. So I'm going to need some training because obviously I don't want to just go out there and just throw as hard as I can. I could hit 80. I could hit 80 right now. At 37, I could hit 80 right now.
When you guys come to New York again, I think we're going to test this out in real time.
Absolutely. I would have not believed 80 until I saw one of our guys pitch this year and he hit 80, and I was like, okay, I think more people could actually touch 80. So I could believe that.
80 is the baseline number. So
yeah.
Plus or minus 80, we're going with that. Actually, I threw out a first pitch of the Durham Bulls when I was in college, but I threw out one first pitch when I was in LA, and it was with the Angels. And because the Dodgers hate the Clippers, so they never ask any of our guys to do it.
Yeah.
So I threw to Mike, and he caught me, and I told him, I'm like, I'm going to go for it, just so you know, like I'm not lobbing it over home plate. And I didn't realize how high the major league mound was. So the pitch came in a little low and a little hot, and it nearly broke his shin. And I nearly put him on the disabled list.
You almost took out one of the greatest players of all time.
I still feel bad about that. All right,
stuff.
Jack, man, we appreciate the time, man. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.